Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace, the blessings, and the mercy of Allah be upon all of you. Thank you for joining us again here in our panel. And with us, like Sheikh Yusuf would like to say, our favorite speakers, favorite scholars in this program. And we have Sheikh Yusuf, and very honored to have with us also Dr. Ja'far Sheikh Idris. I think, Sheikh, we stopped last time talking about the challenge of communism and how the moral appeal to it was the main attraction to the people. And we were talking about how in Islam that moral aspect of caring for the poor and the needy is also present there. And I think Sheikh Yusuf was asking about the...
Yeah, I actually wanted to move to the third phase that we, maybe in your life, and that is when you went to the university and the kinds of challenges that you faced probably became bigger and bigger and so forth. So maybe you can tell us, the viewers, about this
Yes,
phase.
just a few words. When I went to the university, of course, the challenge of communism continued because many of the students in the university and even some of the teachers and lecturers also were communists. But the challenge broadened because I got involved in politics. And one of the challenges was how can Islam be a better replacement for secularism, because the only institutions that people knew were secular. That is what people inherited from the British. And so people used to ask you, how can you have banking without interest? And you know that this was a big challenge, and many Muslim scholars had to write about this, and we benefited from what they interestless banks. And this became a reality later on. When this was written at first, people used to laugh at this and say, how can you have banks without interest? There was the question of laws also. How can you have Islamic laws? You have only the Quran and the Sunnah. So how can you make laws from just reading the people? I remember that someone said about himself, he later became a good Muslim, but he said about himself that I used to laugh when I hear you saying that you want an Islamic constitution. I only knew short surahs like قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, and I used to say to myself, what has قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ to do with a constitution for the country? And in this respect, we benefited the writings of some of the da'iyas, like Sheikh Mawdudi wrote on this topic because the problems in Pakistan were very similar to the problems in the Sudan, because Pakistan was ruled by the British and the Sudan was ruled by the British. So this was also a challenge for us.
It sounds, I'm sorry, but it sounds like you're almost asked to prove the validity of Islam in all respects, in economics, in a penal code system, constitution.
Because the people who challenge you, they are Muslims, but they do not accept just replies based on hadith, on verses or hadith, because still there are some people like this. And this has been the case for a long time. Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah says that some people would come to him and talk to him just privately and say to him, don't argue with us on the basis of Quran and Sunnah, because we know that we cannot compete with you. Use rational arguments. And he said he would agree. And he said something to the effect that there are some people whom the evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah will not benefit because they have ideas. For example, if someone has a certain belief that this is something rational and it contradicts something in the Quran and the Sunnah, and he's a good Muslim, he would not say that this verse in the Quran
is wrong or something.
Is wrong. or is against reason. So it has to be reinterpreted to
Fit his,
yes,
what
his
he thinks
principle.
is.
So he said that the best way to deal with a person like this is to show him that what he believed in is not irrational. He said that this is like a disease. You have to cure the disease before you argue this
If you
person.
don't mind, I would like to make a little shift and ask you about something else, and that is your involvement in politics. Like, for example, now we find maybe some scholars of Islam or so who might choose just the path of academia or so, and they stay away from politics. And there are others who might be involved in politics. So did you find yourself in politics forced to be there, or is it something that you felt that was a necessity for da'wah or so?
But I think it came just natural. Of course, I was not a scholar, and I did not think about whether to involve in politics or so. Yes, some traditional scholars told me, and now I thank God that I did not listen to them. They used to tell us not even to read newspaper. But alhamdulillah, I thank God that Allah, that I did not listen to them. One advantage of being involved in politics that I found my experience is that it makes your priorities right. You see, if you become just a pure academician, then your problems will come just from what you read. You find a problem here, then you go and read, have to solve this in this reference and that. But if you are involved in politics, your problems become practical. You see what people are asking, what problems people are facing, and you try to solve those problems. And I think this is a great benefit. I see some scholars now, great scholars, wasting most of their time in things which I consider to be minor. And they neglect what is more important than what they are involved.
I think, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask Sheikh, I know that you said from a very early age you were involved in political activism. I'm just wondering, have you yourself held a political post?
Political post, no. But I joined an Islamic organization that was in, the only little political post perhaps was that when I was in the university, I became the president of the Students' Union. And at that
You
time,
wrote something that was the first thing to be written against a president at the time in the history of...
yes, yes. When I was president of the Students' Union, a military took place, and we were the first to oppose that, and the petition was written by this committee, and it was me who wrote that. We'll put him in prison for just for a few days or so. This, the people, Abud, they were elderly people, and they treated us just like their sons or so.
It would be nice, I guess, if we get out of the prison now and we go to another phase, the last phase that we want to talk about in this episode. And I think it had its challenges as well, and that is when you moved to the United Kingdom, and I think you were, for the first time, probably exposed to the da'wah in the English language.
Now, the challenge there, of course, I was familiar with Western culture, because as I said several times now, the Sudan was ruled by the British. Many of our teachers in high school and in the university were British people. We studied philosophy, economics, or so on, even history, and so on. We're very much aware of even English literature. We're very much aware of Western culture. There were many challenges, but the thing that I found strange is how to teach people Islam. Many people were interested in Islam, and they wanted me to teach them. I had studied English for several times, for several years, but when I came to tell them about Islam, I couldn't find the relevant vocabulary. And that is why some people say that the English language is not a religious language. Yes, it is not religious. I remember I thought of, I did not even Bath. Bath, what is Bath in English? What even the hereafter? So, and I solved the problem by going and reading the translation of the Quran. What helped me was this knowledge of Western culture, because I could easily associate myself with the brothers and sisters whom I was teaching. And many of them said this later on when they wrote their memories and said this.
Speaking of which, Sheikh, have you yourself written a memoir or a memory at this point?
No, many people ask me to do this, but I think it's too late now. I don't have a good memory, and I did not write. Perhaps if I write, I thought just a few days ago, I said to myself, if I write, I will just say, not memoirs, but things that I remember.
I think we just have a couple of minutes, and in these couple of minutes, I'd like to ask you about the challenges of today. What is the biggest challenge that you see facing people today?
Of course, the biggest challenge is the West. And the problem is that we are not united in facing this challenge. So there is a challenge on one side, and there is division among Muslims on the other side. The Western influence in the Muslim world is increasing. It is.
And Sheikh, I take it that
than,
you're talking about the negative influence of the West.
of course, there are some good things. So I'm talking, yes, about the negative things. So it is increasing. And on the other hand, Muslims are not
ill-equipped to
are
face
not united.
Mm-hmm.
Are not united to face this challenge. But in spite of this, the little efforts that Muslims are making are having also influence on the West. For example, people like you who live in the West can have some influence. And I think that the West is ready. From what I read about the West are ready. They are not satisfied with everything. For example, this economic crisis showed them that capitalist philosophy is not a philosophy to stick to. So they started looking for, and I remember Obama said that something to the effect that he will not bind himself with any ideology, economic ideology. And Brown, the British Prime Minister, said, laissez-faire has had its day.
Unfortunately, this episode also will have to come to an end. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having you and having you, Sheikh Yasser, with us. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of you. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to also accept from all of you, our viewers, for being with us and watching us in this episode. And we hope to see you again in the near future, inshaAllah. Until then, I leave you with the peace and the blessings of Allah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.